Hey, this is Coach Boydston, and in this screencast, we're going to be looking at ecological succession. So what is that? Well, when we're talking about ecological succession, we're primarily talking about plant growth or vegetative growth. We're talking about this process of, say, an area that's been destroyed, wiped out by a bad disaster, or maybe new land that is formed by a volcano or glaciers moving, and that progression that that land goes through with the smaller plants moving in, and then bigger plants, shrubs, and then moving on and on to a more mature, what we call climax community. And so as that happens, that takes many, many years. And so succession is a very slow process, but it's a fairly predictable process. And so the two types that we have that we're going to look at today is primary and secondary. So the first one here in the top left is primary succession. When we're talking about primary succession, this is occurring after the formation of new land. So whether it's a glacier that moves, or whether in this case we have a volcano producing a new island. And so what we're left with is bare rock. That area right there, that new island, is not going to just be bare rock forever. It's going to go through a process of organisms moving in, new plants growing, all its way up to a very mature forest land, or what we call climax community. The next one here down at the bottom is an example of secondary succession. Now, secondary succession, obviously is secondary. It's going to occur when there's an area that maybe already was a climax community, already was a mature community of plants. But then something like in this example, a tornado blew through the side of this mountain, wiping out a lot of the trees and vegetative growth. That area that got wiped out is going to have to go through this progression or succession of changes to get itself back to that mature community that it was. And so let's take a look at the first one. Primary succession, we said it's going to happen after the formation of new land, like after this lava flow here. And if we look at this chart, showing us kind of this progression here. This can take hundreds to thousands, even 1,000 years. I mean, this process can be very, very slow for primary succession. And it's because we start with bare rock. So the one thing that we have with bare rock is that it's solid and there's no soil. And so if you look over here at this climax community on the right, or we call the final mature community, the climax community, you're going to notice there's a good layer of soil here. Large trees and plants require a good amount of soil to root down in and grow. So initially, when we have the formation of new land and primary succession, we don't have that soil, so we don't have trees growing around right away. So something has to modify that rock and prepare soil and get it ready for more plants to grow in and keep maturing. And we call those pioneer species. So in this case, our two pioneer species are lichens and mosses here. And if you don't know what a lichen is, here's your picture of a lichen growing on this rock here. We have a picture of some moss. These pioneer species will grow, and what they do is they modify the rock and soil and start to produce soil that's going to allow, if we look here next, for things like our herbs and weeds and our small grasses to grow in. And then those small herbs and grasses are going to modify that soil some more, making it able for things like shrubs and your smaller trees to grow in until we completely go through this succession and we end up with a climax community. And so primary succession starts with bare rock and then works its way to a climax community. It's those pioneer species, lichens and mosses, that are going to modify that environment, making it more favorable for these other plants to slowly start to grow in. The next one that we have is secondary succession. We said this is going to be after the disturbance. And so we have our tornado up here on the left. I have a picture here of a wildfire, or an area after a wildfire. I think that's from Colorado, the wildfires they had there last year. And then we have an area where we have another picture here, which would be human disturbances, such as logging or creating new places for, like, wiping out an area to build homes. All those are disturbances. And when we have those disturbances, that area is going to have to go through a segment of succession to regain back to that climax community it once was. And this can take quite a long time. So the example that I have here in this chart obviously is dealing with a wildfire, but if a wildfire destroys an area, this process of succession is going to have to start. And if you look at this, there's one big difference here with secondary succession over primary. Primary, we had the formation of new land in the form of bare rock. There was no soil. If we look here in year 0, we already have soil present after secondary succession. So when there's a disturbance to land that has already gone through primary succession, so it's already gone through that process of developing into climax community, now some type of disturbance destroys it, well, now that soil is already there, so the succession doesn't take as long. We don't have to wait for that soil to form. The soil is already there. So in secondary succession, the pioneer species here are going to be things like your annual plants and your grasses that start to come in first. And it's because there's already soil there to help them establish. And then you're going to have your saplings and your small trees, and they're going to slowly continue to grow into that climax community again. So secondary succession is going to be after a disturbance. And so obviously primary succession already happened, then a disturbance occurred, now it has to go through secondary succession. So just to show you an example of that, somebody took a time-lapse photo. They took one photo in the same spot over about 5 years of an area that was destroyed by wildfires. And so what you're looking at here in this picture was the wildfire happened a year ago, and so this is 1 year later. And you see there's not a whole lot there. We have a couple weeds and stuff starting to kind of come in. That's about it. We go to year 2. You're starting to see those grasses and the weeds, the things that are probably dormant in the soil that the fire exposed. Year 3, 4, and 5. And so you can see this is a very slow process. This is not going to happen overnight. Here in year 5, I can see some small little sapling of trees starting to sprout up. And so we'd have to give them probably a good 10 years, even more, for those things to start to show up as trees in that area again. So again, that was primary succession, secondary succession. Ecological succession is talking about plant and vegetative growth and just this predictable process they go through from the early stages of trying to repair themselves into a climax community. So again, I'm Coach Boyston. Hopefully that was helpful.